Next report is the combined polling locations. We have spoken about that one time previously. Barb sent us a number of documents related to that, and I'm just going to ask Barb if you would kind of talk as much as you can about that yes vote or no vote sheet that you sent out. I think all board members got that yet.
Certainly. The statute from the 2017 session had changed a bit, and school districts can combine polling locations, and they would need to do that by the end of the year. That said, approving the polling locations for a general election, which would be that second Tuesday in November of 2018, and also approving combined polling locations in the event of a special election, if the board were to do that, does need to be done by December 31st. That said, a yes vote is simply setting up the how if an election were to occur. We do know that we will have board member elections next year for the general election on the ballot. So we're required to name our combined polling locations for the next year in the event of a special election. In working, as you know, with Washington County, they do run all of our elections. The polling locations, they send me the list. They say these are your combined polling locations. They're the same ones with the exception of one that we've used for the last 10 years. A no vote means if you were not to combine the polling locations but to use that full list in the event of a special election, it would be an additional cost to the board. A special election generally runs around ballpark $50,000. To pull the locations out of a combined location would be about $4,000 for each additional poll that you would want to open. For instance, we do have voters in Scandia. It is two, a husband and a wife. In the event of a special election, typically we combine that location and they would go to May Township to vote. Otherwise, we would need the Scandia Township to open their location and stay open all day from 7 till 8 for the polls. So there is an additional expense if you are to not combine locations, but it is recommended to combine locations.
Thank you. Director Stibland.
So one of my questions was who determined what the combined locations would be, and why are there only, I think there's only 5 here. I mean, I was thinking when I was looking at this that if we were going to have a special election for our purposes, the people would be voting for something relating to the school district only, right? That's
correct.
What we'd be talking
Yes.
about? Okay, so wouldn't we want even fewer locations? I mean, this doesn't seem like a radical of enough change for such a situation. Do you understand what I mean? To only have 5, we go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, like 11 locations get put down to 5, but all the rest stay the same. So it's really not that big of a savings. You know what I'm saying?
It is. Combining locations, the way I understand it with my conversation in the county, is it's dual purpose. And legislation this year, the change was, for example, for some of the smaller districts and out-of-state districts, in the event of a special election, they would not generally use a county or municipal polling location, but just use their schools. And this is helping voters with consistency to go to their combined locations.
We don't choose those spots.
We don't choose those spots. They are already, because you'll see them, they're repeated on the general election size, so they're determined as polling locations.
So then are you saying these would be the same combinations that we would use if Washington County was going to have a special election of some sort? Or some other entity? Is that what you're saying? There would be consistency?
It's consistent because these are the same combined locations that we have been using for the last 10 years.
Okay.
Director Potacek.
Yes, Barb, I can't see you very well, so I'm going to look up here at the screen.
Okay.
So if you talk that way, but I've got a couple questions, but I think they're easy ones. And what you need the combined polling locations for is if you have a special election. But if you have a national election, say presidential, a gubernatorial election, those are called general elections. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. The board could hold a special election and choose to hold it on that second Tuesday in November. So then all of the polling locations would be open.
Okay, and it seems to me, and again, I'm just trying to get the context on this, that there are three possible special election purposes, and maybe there's more than that, but the way I look at it, there's, if you have to have a special election, say to elect a board member, somebody dies, moves out of the area, or for whatever reason, you need to fill an open spot. Secondly, and this is no particular order, if you had a renewal for a levy, that could be a special election, or it could be in a general election. And the same thing would be true for bond facilities. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. I can think of one additional, and that would be a capital levy, which a lot of districts use or call technology levies.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, I agree on that. Now, having said that, and I looked, and thank you for compiling all of these things, because there are a lot of pieces here that you've supplied us with. But it seemed to me the context where this came up last year in the legislature was the legislature was discussing the issue of whether to only allow special elections to be part of when general elections are held. Now, for whatever reasons, they decided not to make that exclusive.
Okay.
Now, but I think another part of this ingredient here, as I read the statute, and Tom, you help me out if I need it, and that is you can do this every year. In other words, if we're going to do this for the 2018, we've got to do it by December 31st. If for the following year you haven't done it, you got to do it again for the following year.
Correct.
And every time it's the same cutoff, and that was kind of a way to match that. So is that accurate?
That is.
Okay.
It's an annual resolution that the board would have to pass in the event that they would hold a special election.
And to piggyback on Sarah's question, what they're required to do is if you're going to have special elections, you've got to get this passed ahead of time. You have to. And who determines where those are or how they're combined is the local municipality or the local township or whatever.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So those are my questions. I'm just trying to make sure I understand, and I think I do.
Okay, any other, Director Pelletier.
Thank you. I guess I just have, a comment and a question. Yes, it's a statute issue, and it does save us money. Is that correct? If we as opposed to if there's a special election and we have to use all of the designated locations. Is that correct?
Right. It's approximately $4,000 more to use the individual out of the combined.
Okay, and you know, I'm looking, because Lake Elmo is my wheelhouse, and back in the day when I used to have an actual arm, I could pretty much throw a ball from the fire hall to city hall. So I guess you know, they're exceptionally close by. So I'm just curious. Can you just clarify again? I'm trying to see if this is more of an issue than it doesn't seem to be a huge issue to me, to be honest. So I'm just trying to make sure that my opinion is sound. We have been using these polling locations for 10 years. Is that correct? Okay, thank you.
And I had a question.
Director Stivlin.
I'm so sorry. How often have we had a special election in the last, say, 30 years?
Oh, good grief.
I mean, has it
I would
happened?
have to go back and take a
I
look.
mean, does it happen? I mean, how unlikely is this?
Director Pearson.
I don't know the answer to
I
that.
think it could happen. If we went to renew our levy, we could do that in a May. I think a May election would be one that you'd look at. So I think it could happen. And if we lost a board member, that's when else we need to do it.
So like when we passed the bond in May of 2015, that was a special election.
Yes.
And so during that time, we used these polling places.
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Director Potacek.
So one of the issues, and that's the argument for having a combined polling locations, is in the interests of being frugal, saving money.
Correct.
But that's the same issue that was discussed in the legislature, that if you were going to have these, why not just do them during general elections, whether they be gubernatorial elections, because our percent of cost goes way down because the state or whatever picks up a lot more of the cost.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think an example of that, though, maybe is if you go out for a renewal in the fall and, you know, several districts, if it doesn't go through and you decide you need it, you go out for an ask again in May. Otherwise, you'd have to wait till the next November, and that money is another year out. So I think it's just timelines.
And that's the point. I think for some, it's facilities, or flexibility is the better question. I think for some, they see this as a strategic.
Well, now I'm confused.
Director Pelletier.
What kind of strategy, I guess? I'm confused now.
Typically, more
Director
people
Potacek.
turn out, thank you, more people turn out during a national election or a state election than they do for special elections.
We're voting on this next week, the 16th, so if you've got additional questions, I guess Barb's the person to get a hold of.